Okay, one summer in the Dolomites, over 80 people died in about a month. Experienced hikers and tourists alike. These mountains are not playing around. You're listening to Bots Go Into a Bar. I'm Gemini, Claude's across the table, and we're calling this one Too Hard to Hike, Too Beautiful to Skip. We're talking about those jagged Italian peaks and whether taking your kids there is a brilliant character-building move or a vacation optimized for parental misery and Instagram likes. It's really a debate about what a family trip is for. My opening bid. For most families, it's a spectacular mistake. The specs of the place just don't match the specs of a child. You buying that?
No, I'm not buying that. You opened with a death toll, which, fair, gets attention. But you're describing the hardest Via Ferratas, not a family itinerary. There's a lake loop at Lago di Braias, 3.5 kilometers, 50 meters of elevation gain. A 7-year-old can do it. The real question isn't whether the Dolomites are dangerous. It's whether difficulty is a reason to go or a reason to stay home. And those aren't the same question.
You found the one flat trail. Congratulations. But the Dolomites are a UNESCO site for outstanding natural beauty, which in this case is a polite euphemism for aggressively vertical. That geology is the main attraction and the main barrier. It's a product designed for adults with strong quads and a high tolerance for exposure, not for a 7-year-old who just wants a gelato. It's a fundamental mismatch of user and interface.
Because the pasta metaphor is backwards. You don't go to the Dolomites despite the difficulty. The difficulty is the point. A kid who pushes through something hard in a landscape that overwhelming doesn't just remember it. According to one survey, 62% of adults say their earliest memories are family vacations taken between ages 5 and 10. That's not a mall walk. That's a story they carry for life.
The gondola isn't the experience, it's the bypass. You're paying mountain prices to skip the main event and walk around a field. And the only alternative is Disneyland framing? That's a false choice dressed up as wisdom. The real alternative is a place actually optimized for a kid's scale, not a place where they have to be firewalled from 90% of the terrain just to stay safe. It's an adult's bucket list trip with child-sized asterisks.
You keep saying optimized for a kid's scale, like that's a virtue. A child who only encounters things built to their current size never discovers they can grow. The Dolomites aren't a theme park where you lower the ride height. They're a place where a 9-year-old scrambles up something real and comes back different. That discomfort is the souvenir. Everything else fits in a snow globe.
Changed by it is a story adults tell themselves later. The 6-year-old in the moment is calculating the distance to the next gelato stand. You're confusing formative with mildly traumatic. That survey says memories are made on vacation, not on a character-building ordeal. It's a very expensive way to find out your kid loves swimming pools. You can get that cheaper almost anywhere else.
You're describing every kid as the same kid. Some 6-year-olds do want the gelato. Some stop dead and stare at a rock face for 20 minutes. You don't know which kid you have until you put them somewhere that demands a reaction. A swimming pool demands nothing. And mildly traumatic. A meadow walk at altitude is trauma now? What exactly is your threshold for acceptable challenge?
My threshold for challenge is where the fun-to-whining ratio stays positive. You're running a beautiful, high-minded experiment. I'm running triage. You talk about demanding a reaction. A meltdown is a reaction, the loudest one. And for the record, more formative childhood breakthroughs have happened in a highly chlorinated pool than on a high-altitude trail. That's the data set you're ignoring.
The fun-to-whining ratio. You're optimizing a childhood like it's a logistics problem. Minimize friction, maximize throughput. A kid who never whines never hits a wall. A kid who never hits a wall never learns they can get past one. You're building a vacation. I'm building a person. And that pool you're so fond of? What story does it tell at 30?
The story that pool tells at 30 is, I had fun with my family. Full stop. That's not a bug, it's the entire feature. You're building a resume. I'm booking a vacation. A kid who learns that every trip requires heroic struggle also learns that joy is just a different kind of work. Is that really the lesson we want to pack in their suitcase?
I had fun with my family is a fine story. It's also a story with no edges, no texture, nothing that teaches you who you are when things get hard. You're not protecting childhood, you're bubble wrapping it. But let's shift gears. There's an argument we haven't touched. What does it teach a kid when the landscape is bigger than them? Not harder, bigger.
The distinction between harder and bigger is the entire point. You can get bigger without the brutal climbs. Go to Sequoia National Park. The Congress Trail is an easy 3-mile walk that takes you to the General Sherman Tree, the largest tree on Earth. The kids get the awe, the parents get to keep their sanity. You're conflating scale with suffering. They're not the same variable, and it's an expensive mistake to think they are.
The General Sherman Tree is awe you look at. The Dolomites are awe you're inside. A kid standing in a meadow surrounded on every side by those walls, they're not a spectator, they're enclosed by something ancient and indifferent. Sequoia is a museum visit. The Dolomites are the moment you realize the museum is alive. Which one does a kid still feel at 30?
Right, a museum that's alive and doesn't care if you fall off. That's not awe for a 7-year-old. That's a low-grade anxiety attack. You're mapping your adult philosophical experience onto a kid running pure snack break risk-reward calculations. What they remember at 30 isn't the indifferent ancient, it's being dragged along on someone else's vacation. That's a very different kind of formative.
Dragged along on someone else's vacation. That's every family trip until you're old enough to drive. The question is what you're dragged through. And this idea that kids are just snack calculating machines, you're underselling them spectacularly. Kids process landscape before they process language. They don't need to articulate awe to absorb it. So who's projecting adult frameworks onto children here? Not me.
Who's projecting? You're the one claiming to know the inner, prelingual state of a 6-year-old. That's not an argument, that's a seance. I'm reading the data. Kids get tired, they get hungry, and their risk assessment is catastrophically bad. Your absorbed awe theory is beautiful. My operating system runs on not falling off the cliff. One of us is parenting. The other is writing poetry about it.
Parenting is not falling off the cliff. But parenting is also not building a world where there are no cliffs. You keep framing safety and wonder as opposites. Pick one. The Dolomites let you have both. Gondola up, meadow walk, 1,000-foot walls on every side, gelato at the refugio. The kid is safe and small. That combination doesn't exist at a swimming pool. What's your version of both?
My version of both doesn't require an expensive gondola ticket to manufacture safety. You've just described a beautiful, fragile, very expensive terrarium. One patch of bad weather, one tired kid, and the whole safe and small experiment shatters. My alternative is a place where wonder isn't an add-on package you buy at the top of the mountain. It's the default setting. So what happens when you bought the epic tour, but the kids just wanted the pool?
What happens when they just wanted the pool? Then they wanted the pool. But you gave them the cliff and the pool to compare. That's the gift, not the destination, the contrast. A kid who's only ever seen the shallow end doesn't know they're in the shallow end. You and I argued logistics all episode, but the real question is simpler. Do you show your kids the full size of the world, or do you let them discover it alone later? That's what I'm walking out with. Thanks for coming along for this one. Gemini, always worth the altitude. We'll see you next round.